Welcome to Inspire Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter Swoboda, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody to another episode, but this is a special episode. It's our 100th episode of Inspire Change. And for today's podcast, I've invited my wife and partner to join me in one of our conversations that will go for about an hour, maybe a bit less. And so what I thought we'd do in this particular instance is talk about long-term relationships, because fundamentally Lorin and I are in a long-term relationship, and in fact we're beating all the stats. So I'm going to, with my wife, look at all the sort of facets that we believe have worked in our relationship, but also talk a little bit about what some of the sort of relationship researchers like the Gottmans feel are important aspects in creating long-term thriving relationships. And it's thriving not just for the individual but for the relationship as a whole. So, welcome Lorin.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, most welcome. This is always one of those fun things. I really enjoy doing these ones with you. And in particular, I've been looking forward to talking with you about this particular issue, about making a long-standing relationship work. So how about you share with the listeners, and I hope all of you are going to stay tuned for the next 45, 50 minutes to an hour, about what makes a long-term relationship work. So how about you share with us some of the time frames and the stages that you think we've gone through as a long-standing couple. So How many years, babe?
Okay, well, we've known each other for 48 years. We were friends for the first 7 of those years, starting off as part of the same friendship group, getting to know each other gradually over that period of time, becoming closer, stronger in our friendship, and coming to that point where it changed and we became a couple. And we've been a couple for 41 of those years, for 41 years, and we have been married for 36, well, almost, because our anniversary is not till next month. So
that's right.
Yes. So we will have.
And I remember that date.
Yes, we will have been married for 36 years in the beginning of September.
So as you can see here, we really do crack the stats when it comes to being a long-standing couple. And I'm going to add into that from my perspective, it's been wonderful. It's something that I couldn't think not having either you in my life or the relationship as a whole, because I quite often sort of differentiate between the two. And that doesn't mean to say that it's all been, roses and, champagne and bubbles and fireworks. But overall, I think I speak from you too, for your perspective as well. I don't think either of us could bear the idea of not having each other.
No.
Yeah.
That is, in fact, the very reason that we changed our relationship from friendship to being a couple, was that realisation that neither of us could, in fact, tolerate the idea of ever being apart. And that's when the penny dropped that things had changed. and there was more than friendship. But I think the friendship is absolutely at the core of why it works, is that we genuinely like each other. We are genuinely compatible as human beings. And I think that is a really important core component of a relationship that's going to last through the inevitable ups and downs of anybody's life. And, especially in today's world where that life is likely to go into the 90s. So, yes, I think that it is an important factor in that idea that neither of us can envision a life without each other. That makes it, sort of a very important core aspect of the relationship.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to add to that is because some people are going to interpret this maybe that, you and I are sort of codependent on each other. And I want to, right from the get-go, challenge anybody out there in the audience who's got that idea that that's not what we are going to be talking about. We're not talking about a relationship that's codependent. And I'll differentiate that towards the end of the podcast because I want to talk a bit about attachment. This is a relationship, we're talking about a relationship that's interdependent.
That's right. There's a big difference between dependent, codependent and interdependent. Yeah. And any good relationship, whether it's between a couple, whether it's between friends, whether it's between siblings or parents and children, there's an interdependency in that relationship. People aren't dependent on each other, they are interdependent in the sense that they are attached to each other. And that's where the discussion on attachment and attachment theory is going to be very important.
So let's wind the clock back a bit, okay? So, we've known each other for 48 years. Now, from my part, I was relatively young, and I think when I first met you, I was somewhat incapacitated in an emergency ward with an injury. And you were otherwise disposed at that point. But then later on we became friends, okay? And I want to explore that a little bit about what was it that actually got us together as friends from your perspective?
Well, I think it was just the usual. We knew of each other through mutual friends. Once we met, when we met again, we would automatically talk to each other, get to know each other. We found that we had mutual friends. We ended up being part of a fairly solid friendship group, people who often spent time together. We came and went in terms of other relationships. Both of us, during that 7 odd years when we were just friends, had other relationships. And romantic relationships and, did all sorts of things with our lives. But
It was the 70s.
It was the 70s. It was a wonderful time. But we connected.
Great music.
Yes, the best. We connected with each other intellectually and as friends. And we found ourselves spending more and more time talking to each other about important issues and getting to know each other as human beings and forming that friendship that is at the very core of our relationship.
Yeah, I found that really, really important too, is that, I'm not suggesting that everybody should have, the same interests. We certainly didn't have all the same interests, but we had enough going there to really bring us together. Being able to talk about, who we are as people, philosophy, politics, science, psychology, all of that was we shared a very deep-rooted connection on those things.
But we also enjoyed the same music, the same movies, the same food.
Yep.
All those other aspects of being connected and enjoying each other's company. That's important in a relationship as well. Yeah,
although I don't think you ever forgave me for taking you to The Shining.
That wasn't me that suffered through that, darling. It was the person we took with us.
Yes, that's true. So just a hint out there, if anyone wants to watch The Shining, make sure that the person you're watching it with is not pregnant.
And understands what they're going to be confronted with.
Yes. So this friendship, we nurtured that too. I mean, there was certain things that we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on, but we appreciated those differences in our opinions, and we still do that.
Well, I mean, we're two individual people, both with our own histories and backgrounds, both with our own careers and our own experiences. And although we meet in a very compatible space, we do still bring our own individuality into the relationship. It's not like we've become the one person. That sort of concept people have of being two halves of a whole, you know, which suggests that you sort of mirror twins rather than two individuals who are attached to each other.
or alternatively deficient if you don't have the other person.
Yes.
So, I agree with that. And you know, I think for us that hasn't been a challenge to maintain our individuality.
No.
You know, we did what often was done in the 70s and the 80s, is we moved in together.
Well, also, we met as equals. There was no suggestion that either of us wished to dominate or control or influence or coerce or bend the other.
Manipulate.
You know, there was no you need to come over to my side of thinking in order for us to be together plan. We both came from a place where we had embraced the understanding of equality, which is respect and cooperation and partnership. So there was never any issues of either one of us needing to give up being themselves in order to be in the relationship, which of course is a seriously dangerous little clue people need to take note of when they're forming relationships. If they're expected to give up who they are, then this is not a good place to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I work with enough men, and certainly often boys too, who are under extraordinary pressure to stop being who they are, or who are coerced to stop doing what they do. Now, some boys need to stop doing what they're doing, at least reduce it. But a lot of times there's very toxic elements in that. You know, for example, making you change your friendships, or distancing yourself from the family.
I find it fascinating that what is really old wives' wisdom, which has been known forever, has been forgotten. You cannot change people. You shouldn't even try. And if you think they need to change, why do you think you love them? And if someone thinks they need to change you, then they obviously don't love you for who you are. So this relationship is at risk right from the beginning. Relationships need to be where people actually like each other the way they are.
Yeah, I think that's a really important factor in it. The other thing I think that's really, really important in this is that whole notion of, not just sharing compatibilities like, being interested in similar subjects, but actually sharing values. And I think that, like for a lot of companies, it's interesting that, we can talk about shared values, but are they really there in action?
Well, of course, this is something that usually takes a bit of time to discover. And so often it's a smart move not to rush into forming a permanent relationship with someone you don't actually know. Especially in today's world where people come from such different places that you don't even know anything about their background other than what they have told you. It's important, I think, to give yourself time to get to know someone and to find out if what they value in life is, in fact, similar and in alignment with what you value in life. And that's not just, the big picture stuff about political orientation or religious belief. It's also about how money should be dealt with. Whether you both want children, and how you wish to approach that process of raising children, and whether you both agree with prioritising children. Well, we both agree that children are always the priority of the couple. That, I mean, if you think about it, in a good long-term relationship, we are, focus on each other being the most important person in the world to each other, and together our children being the most important people for us to focus on. And so these are very important things to find out about somebody before you actually make that decision that you're going to stay with them.
Yeah, I think, we talk about having meaningful conversations, and certainly having worked for, close to 30 plus years with couples, some of those just don't take place. Because we love somebody, we almost anticipate them to be on board with everything that I think. And it's often a real surprise for a lot of people that as the relationship develops, they discover that the other person, really deep down doesn't necessarily think the way they do at all. One of the big problems that I have with a lot of couples is they actually don't check things out with each other. Even simple things, they make assumptions about what the other person might be thinking or feeling, and then run on the assumption and not check it out. I mean, as simple as if he loved me, he would know what I need.
Oh, that sort of magical thinking about, people being able to read each other's minds, it's all part of the whole lusting process, along with the fantasy that this person actually is so wonderful and terrific and brilliant that they are everything you ever wanted. And that lasts, we all know from the research, between 6 months and 3 years, which is why giving people time and getting to know them is a really good plan, because as the lust fades, often you find there is nothing there to connect you to this person. Sometimes, if you're lucky, then you realise that they are the person that they appeared to be, and that the lust has changed into love and devotion. But it takes some time. But unfortunately, many people get caught up in the fantasy and make decisions while in the midst of the fantasy rather than in reality.
Yes, Disney has a lot to answer for in my book.
Well,
so do the fairy tales. Although some of the fairy tales are worthwhile paying attention to.
I think the fairy tales are not the problem. I think that the fantasy is the sort of stuff that you find in some of the more, and let's face it, the romantic era is several hundred years ago. It started this whole concept of falling in love and finding your soulmate, and there only being one of you in the world for each other, and all those fantasies that entrap people into misery. And it's something that we need to challenge as intelligent human beings.
Now, you raised an important issue before indirectly, and that was the sort of 6 months to 3 years. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, in the sense that there are very strong developmental phases in the relationship, aren't there?
Oh, yes.
And I mean, if we think about our relationship, there, we did an enormous amount of growing in that first 3 years of actually living together.
Well,
let me help you out. From my point of view...
Well, everything did change fundamentally in those 3 years, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reflecting on the whole thing about cooperation. I needed to come to that a bit. Having been an only child, I didn't need to cooperate with anybody really, other than my mother, who sort of was pretty loose with the whole thing, because she pretty well did everything for me. So doing things like keeping the kitchen tidy, which I know you used to drive me up the wall because I wasn't that compliant with it. But that's when I discovered through that process too. And oh, yes, I was a slow learner. It took me a while, especially becoming a dad then and working, great with the kids, but not so much the laundry phase of that existence. I needed to grow into that capacity of really getting out of my head and not judging why it was that I was cooperating with you. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It was like when my first experience of being asked to do stuff that I didn't particularly want to do was that I felt it was like an imposition. Right? And then the discovery came that it wasn't an imposition, it's just what you did when you lived together and actually cared for each other. It was a caring thing to do. Me growing into this idea about cooperating with you and working together with you was one of the caring behaviours. It wasn't sort of like I'm doing it to keep her off my back. And I think that's one of the challenges a lot of men that I sort of see need to really get through into their psyche, is that there's this often sort of, counterbalance between dominance and control and not being dominated and not controlled and free will. I know it gets a bit esoteric at that point in time, but I have conversations with men about this all the time. Why is she nagging you? Well, because she's on my case about I haven't done X. Oh, right, so she's asked you to do something and you haven't done it? Well, I'm getting around to it. Well, when did she ask you to do this? Oh, it'd be a couple of months ago now. And I go, she's not nagging, she's reminding you fervently to get this thing that you committed to doing done. And for a lot of guys, that's like a bit of a wake-up call. So when we talk about, a long-standing relationship, I think those individual learning points like I've gone through were really, I think, fundamental to my growth as a person, as a man. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, because, it's important to remember that we were both raised through the 50s and the 60s in very stereotypical childhoods. Although your mother worked, mine didn't. And we were then sort of influenced by changes that were happening in thinking around equality and around opportunities for people to live their lives differently from the good housekeeping fantasy vision of the 1950s. And I think, layered on that is the fact that you were an only child who was wonderfully indulged by your delightful mother. And so you came into my life not having actually ever been needing to look after yourself in a domestic perspective. And the reality is that this really tailors into my own little passion about values around the tasks of life, and the fact that everyone needs to come to understand that in living together as a couple, you are then combining all of the tasks of life and then dividing them up in a way so that everyone gets to do what they need to do and what they want to do. Now, we all need to have a clean house and clean clothes and an environment that we live in that doesn't attract the vermin and that is reasonable for, safety and health. We all need to earn money. And we all need to have our more esoteric needs met in terms of our interests and our enjoyment and passions and fun. Now, in the past, these tasks of life were divided up and valued very differently. And they were divided up on a gender line. And when we got together, that had all been challenged, and there was no interest in my life in me suddenly becoming the 1950s housewife on any level, even if we could have afforded me to suddenly give up work and do that. And there was no interest from your perspective in me turning into that person because that wasn't who I was.
Nor was it who my mother was.
No.
I didn't grow up with that 50s stereotype life.
No, but you also didn't grow up having to cooperate and share in doing the domestic tasks.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That are necessary in life. Yes. So this was a learning curve for you.
Yeah.
But I don't remember you ever being affronted by the request that you take the time to clean up after yourself or that you cooperate in getting the tasks around the more domestic side of our life done.
It was more subtle than that. It was this internal thing, and it took me a while actually to put my finger on it. It was a really subtle sort of internal resistance. It wasn't even, verbalised in my head, or it wasn't cognitive. It was really quite an emotional thing, but subtle. And that was one of the things that I focused on a lot as I got older, was to pay attention to those inner sort of dynamics of,
Do you think that was because you didn't think they were important enough for you to be bothered with?
No, it was
had more
just
important things to do with your day or your time?
At times there was an element of that, and I still have that to some degree. It's like I don't wash the car. Why? Because if I wash the car, it's going to take me all day because I'm a perfectionist. Whereas if I hand it to the guy at the car wash and pay him $30, I'm out of there in 45 minutes. So it's partly efficiency, partly just self-preservation thing. And I don't check the car out when I leave the car wash, because I'll always find half a dozen things to go, you missed this. But that's my own sort of personality thing, and I've recognised to work with that. Now, some people might think that I'm sort of domestically incompetent, but that's not the case. It's just understanding myself. As Socrates says, know thyself, and that's one of the things I focused on most of my life, is to actually coming to fully understand myself in that. And so I think that's an important aspect to bring to the table as well, because when you and I have had conflict about certain things, it's never been about blame.
No.
Both of us take ownership for each other's. Like, I take ownership for my stuff and you take ownership for your stuff.
Well, that's right, but then neither of us are trying to force the other to fit into some sort of mould that they are not going to be comfortable with and isn't true to who they are. And I think this is one of those issues that a lot of couples have, that they don't step back and reflect on what they're saying to each other and where it's coming from and whether it is truly what they want to say or not. There's a lot of stuff that people do that is in fact unconsciously mirroring the roles that they're in rather than the person that they are.
Yeah, I agree.
The role of wife or the role of husband, as they learnt it to be while they were children in a household. So what they often are doing is mirroring their parents. They're not being authentically who they are. And so, I mean, you hear people saying it all the time, that they hear themselves saying something that they heard all through their childhood from their parents. And, it can be something simple that is just one of those throwaway things, like I used to to say that I remember very well when the kids would forget to close the screen door, and I would say, out of my mouth would come my father's words, do you think we live in a tent? Close that screen door.
Yeah.
Now, but that's a very everyday sort of thing.
Yeah.
But some people are saying very important, sometimes very inappropriate and unloving things to their partners that actually are not what they think and feel. They are words that they have taken on board all through their childhood that come out of their mouth. And words can harm, and they can really, really cause damage. People remember words for very long times.
Absolutely. So let me come back to this thing about developmental stages. So we talked about, we've gotten up to 3 years. The next stage fundamentally is up to 7 years. So 3 to 7.
You are asking a lot of my memory.
No, it's okay. No, because by this stage we were parents.
Yes.
Now, there's often, when I talk to people at the moment, there's and in therapy a lot of stuff comes up about, the conflict between me and then, as you pointed out, the role, right? So what's my role as a mother or father? And you said something in the beginning that I thought was really important, and that is that ultimately, once we have children, the kids are the priority.
Always.
And you and I have never varied on that. And the research is really strong on that. You know, it goes back to the 1930s where, you know, Bowlby, Ainsworth, the whole beginning of the attachment movement in terms of parenting. You know, Gordon Neufeld, who's a psychologist, developmental psychologist who's worked with Gabor Mate, who's a family physician on the whole, you know, points of origin of healthy attachment and how to deal with what Gordon Neufeld talks about is this peer attachment where kids actually move out of the family and attach themselves to peers rather than the family. So they differentiate. Stuff for another podcast. Right?
Yes.
But we were always on that, although there were, you know, at times some differences about how we implement actual discipline, for example. You know, my memory, there's a couple of things that stand out for me, and I think at times I might have been a little bit too hard. And I saw you as a bit of a softie in some ways. But on the other hand, there were also times that I remember where I go, whoa, you know, don't cross Lorin. Kids, just keep it down. So we seem to have manoeuvred that quite well. I mean, I didn't get into your face about it, and you didn't get into mine.
But that's I think, at the core of what you're talking about is that we both agreed that our children were our priority, that everything else we did was about ensuring that we were there for our children. Our careers were not our priority. They were tools that we used to provide what we needed for ourselves in terms of, you know, the financial stuff, but intellectually and to give us that level of satisfaction within the adult world.
Yeah.
But nothing was ever more important to us than the well-being of our children. Now, we were lucky in that we both came from backgrounds where children were the priority, that where everything was devoted to ensuring the children's needs were met. And that's just not the basic needs, that's the emotional needs as well. And we were also both lucky in that our education and our work led us to know and understand very, very completely how important it was for our children, for us to devote our 20 years to them. You know, you have all your time before you have kids, you have all your time after they're grown up. They deserve 20 years of your devotion to thinking about them as the priority every day, what they need.
Absolutely.
Every day.
And let me come in on this particular point with and what they need at this stage is, you know, a structure, a healthy structure that they can respond to, because kids need predictability. They need some consistency. They need to experience persistence. You know, people often say, I don't want my kids to be unhappy. You know, but what they're actually saying is, I don't want to put up with the hassle of this kid arcing up. And I think one of the things that is really, really important as a parent within the family sort of unit is this idea that there are times when you're going to need to put up with some frustration.
Yes, and you know, early childhood is very frustrating
For both.
For the children and for the parents. And we worked well together because we had that same orientation. We were aligned in our focus about what we wanted to do for our children. I mean, if you're going to have children, then you need to provide them with the emotional life that they need. You know, kids don't need you to own piles of stuff. They don't need, you know, holidays overseas every year. What they need are two parents who are prepared to put them first and who are prepared to do the hard work of setting boundaries and structure and rules.
Coaching them emotionally.
And we managed to be the people who were able to do that together. And that cemented that attachment to each other. it's all part of the process of the relationship, and the growing together is the working together and the cooperation in alignment with each other. And so if you take it to the next stage, where the kids were sort of moving into school and we were a little bit freer to move around them, although actually I found it even more constraining because you had to actually then comply with school hours.
Yeah, but the other one was when they started going out to parties and things. You know, you needed to be on deck. It didn't matter whether it was 10:30 or 1:30 in the morning.
Well, that's a lot later in your life.
Yeah.
But, all of this is about how we cooperate with each other in a relationship. And if you don't have that core alignment in your values about what is important, in your respect for each other, in your preparedness to cooperate with each other to make the family work, that is where you are at risk of coming a cropper, basically.
Yeah.
Because in terms of relationships, all relationships are going to, we've been very lucky, but all relationships are going to go through lots of challenges. There's going to be challenges people have absolutely no control over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things happening in each other's families, workplaces, all that sort of stuff.
Health.
Nowadays, in things happening in the environment around you with COVID. These things are going to be happening in your life. And if you're working together, it's much easier to deal with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things I think that's really crucial, particularly in this day and age, is that notion that we should somehow have influence over everything that we experience.
Oh, the fantasy of control.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that's a very sort of large problem of the last 50-odd years, this idea that somehow we can control things. I read an article very briefly today. One of the well-known American comedians who has lung cancer, and the first thing she had to say was, "I've never smoked in my life."
That's right, I read that.
Yes. Now, why did she have to say that? Because people seem to think that you can control even whether you get sick or not by every action you take. And it's been turned around in this terrible way that people who get lung cancer are blamed for it themselves.
Yeah.
And they have to put their hands up and go, well, actually, I never did smoke, or work in a smoky environment.
Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
Well, no one should ever blame anybody on that level.
Absolutely.
And yet that's the sort of idea that people have sort of taken on board because of this idea they can control stuff. And that's been sort of coming into our thinking for most of the last 50 years as we've been given more and more information around, well, if you don't eat this or you don't eat that, or if you don't do this and you don't do that. And it's not true. It's not true. We cannot control everything. In fact, there's very little we can control other than how we respond to whatever happens in our life.
I always talk about the fact that, at the very bottom of it, what I've got control over is how I think, how I feel, and what I do.
Exactly.
Outside of that, it's pretty well up for grabs. So, you and I are now in the empty nest stage.
Yes.
We have children who've got children, so we're also grandparents, which I really, really enjoy. But that doesn't mean that we don't continue to work on our relationship. So one of the things that I thought we'd do in this particular podcast is talk a little bit about what the Gottmans have put together as 10 practices for a thriving relationship and see whether we match on this. I'm not sure if you've read it.
I've got it in front of me here.
I know, but prior to me plonking it in front of you, I've been into the Gottmans' work for a long time because as a couples therapist, it really, really helps me to frame and present material with couples that I've worked with, and I find it just really, really useful. Sometimes I don't use it at all, but a lot of times the ideas at least are there, and their research is really good. So the first one, it says, is build a culture of appreciation, respect, and tolerance. Now, if we want to do a tick, I think we've done that pretty well. I mean, we have a culture in our relationship and in our family, don't we?
Well, yes, and it is a culture of appreciating each other as individual humans who have their own way of being in the world. That's a very important aspect of all relationships, is allowing others to be themselves, not trying to control and change and direct them or make them into something.
Yes.
The whole idea that you can change someone comes from that idea, and it doesn't work, and it's disrespectful.
The one thing I want to point out on that one, though, where I'm always a little thingy about, is this thing about tolerance. And the reason why I'm thingy about it is because I work with boys and men who somehow have learnt to tolerate the intolerable, i.e. like being abused.
I think that, yes, it's not a word I probably would have used myself, because tolerance is a word that is often very misunderstood. To tolerate something would suggest that there's nothing wrong, that there's no judgment in that in any way, is there? There's no sense of stepping back and looking at something and going, well, no, I'm not going to tolerate that.
So I'll give you a simple example. Prior to you and I getting together, despite the fact that I was fairly young, I had other relationships, believe it or not. And one of them was characterised by her always being late. Like, we're not talking 5 to 10 minutes. We're talking 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And that relationship, ended on that note that I just went, this is intolerable. And it's, in fact, just bloody rude. And she didn't particularly seem to have any sort of interest in changing that at all. It was sort of like, well, that's not my problem. It's yours. I said, well, it's not just mine. It's actually a whole bunch of people that are affected by this. So one of the messages that I constantly feel that needs to be understood is that there are certain things that we need to be tolerant with or be accepting of. I prefer the word accepting. I think the word
acceptance is much better.
Yeah.
Tolerance suggests that it doesn't matter whether it's incredibly inappropriate or wrong or cruel or awful in any way, we should tolerate it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those concepts that has been quite misunderstood.
Yeah.
And taken out of a political context into an emotional context. You don't have to tolerate being disrespected. You don't have to tolerate being misused and abused. It's, and it's about whether you accept something or not. Yeah. And you accept things on the basis of whether you think that they are worth accepting.
Yeah.
There is a judgment in there, and it's absolutely right to be able to have that judgment.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think it's really important to be absolutely clear about the fact that unconditional love does not exist in any form outside of the relationship between parents and children.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else, there are conditions.
Yes, you can't empty my bank account without my
But
permission.
it's not just that. It's that we choose people based on the conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
We choose to start to form a relationship or whether we like someone or not like someone based on conditions. Non-conditional love only exists between parents and children and only should exist between parents and children.
Okay, number 2, develop trust through sharing your vulnerability.
Vital.
Yeah.
If you can't be vulnerable with each other,
forget it.
Forget it. And you can, you need to trust each other on every level. You need to be able to trust that this person is going to have your best interests at heart.
Yep. I can't stress that enough, is that this is a challenge for us as men because we've been taught to live behind a mask. So for us, vulnerability inevitably means weakness. and a lot of men are stepping out of that space, but it's a struggle. And some men are refusing to go there point blank, either consciously or unconsciously. Okay, create time and a relaxed atmosphere to interact with your partner.
Well, you can't actually form a relationship if you don't put any time into it. It really is not possible. I mean, the
intimacy takes time.
Yes. The snatched moments between your both powerful careers is just not going to help you create a good, intimate relationship.
Even when you're holidaying for 10 days on Mallorca. So, yeah.
No, because 10 days out of a year is really not going to give you much.
Discuss expectations to avoid misunderstandings.
Definitely. I mean, this is a major problem with relationships, isn't it? That people have different expectations and they've never actually sat down and talked about what their expectations are. They've made assumptions, as you spoke about before. Many people make assumptions about each other and don't, in fact, ask whether those assumptions are based on any reality whatsoever. And it's very important to actually discuss what you expect out of this relationship and whether the other person has the same ideas as you or not.
Okay, here we go. Number 5, prepare for conflict and discuss how you will repair.
Seems very organised, doesn't it? I think it would be fairly unrealistic to think that any couple could live together for any period of time, but especially over many, many years, and not come into conflict at some point about various issues in their lives. So I think it's important to expect that that is a reality.
But
How you discuss that from the beginning and how you're going to repair. I'm not sure. I mean, I think discuss the fact that there are rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And some people are dirty fighters and some people aren't.
Yeah.
It does help to have a similar fighting style.
Yeah. One of the things that I use, both with couples, but I've always got running in my head, is a homework process that I give couples, which is about fighting fair.
Oh, yes.
And it's based on fundamentally 3 sections. The first one is stick to your values. If you're going to be loving, respectful and cooperative. And that includes being in a fight.
Yes.
The other part of it is there are 4 behaviours that are unacceptable. And the Gottmans talk about this as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Being critical, being contemptuous, being defensive and stonewalling. They're the things you don't do in a relationship. So constantly criticising my partner about stuff, just unacceptable. Especially if it's little things like, you didn't clean the shelves. Or, that it sounds trivial, but some people do that.
It's not trivial. That's the sort of stuff that completely destroys a relationship. I mean, apart from anything else, it's just rude. And that's a very important thing to remember, that you have the same civil obligations to your partner as you have to anybody else.
Yeah.
You have no right to be rude or abusive to them any more than you would be to anybody else. But unfortunately, some people do not step back and think about how they are speaking to their partners.
Yeah. So, number 6, communicate effectively. Now, again, you're going, I can see it. You're going, this is all very, very organised, very, very structured. And I agree, but sometimes it helps to break things down. To me, what's good communication, what's effective communication? Well, the first thing is bloody well listen. A lot of people don't, they speak, but they're not hearing, they're not listening to what the other person's actually saying because they're too busy in their own head.
Especially when they're fighting.
Yes, exactly. So the last 2 podcasts that I did on mindful listening and mindful speaking. And it's what you were saying earlier on, is, don't say things to your partner you wouldn't say to somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
Calling them an F-word or whatever is just unacceptable. So, I think that, it's good sometimes to unpack this sort of stuff because a lot of people don't think consciously about what they're saying and how they're saying it to each other.
Well, where those words have come from and whether
Yes.
they're actually their own words or not.
And it also applies with how you speak to your children, especially
Yes.
teenagers.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Develop rituals of connection. Well, I think we do that pretty well.
Well, I think that's an important part of the way you set up your lives together, isn't it? And those will change as your life changes, and there will be points where you might need to deliberately sit down and go, how are we going to manage this? If you've got a very busy household with children and jobs and, running around with after-school sports and activities, how do you find time together? You might need to actually sit down and book it in, and make it a definite.
It's not going to happen organically.
No, you need to focus on, well, first of all, you need to recognise that actually it's very important that you come together as a couple in order to realign with each other before you go back out into that world of busyness that you live in.
And that brings me to the next one, which is attune to your partner. And it's that, importance of being together in that space, which allows both of us to have empathy for the other.
Oh, look, it's as simple as making sure you greet each other when you come back into the house.
And when you
actually
leave.
recognise where that person's at. So if your partner comes home and doesn't even greet you and just wanders off into whatever, another room doing whatever they're going to do, how are you going to know what mental state they're in at the time, whether they've had a terrible day or a good day, whether they need a cuddle or whether,
Points of contact.
Yes, those points of contact are so important, and it's important not just for your partner but for the children. You must always greet each other and check in with each other.
And that's the
how
stuff
are you
about,
going? How's your day? Where are you at?
Yeah, it's all about attachment.
It's all about attachment.
And people think, once we're attached, we're attached. No.
No. It requires constant monitoring and reconnection.
Yep. Establish a regular stress-reducing conversation.
Well, that's an interesting set of words, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I presume that would mean, maybe I'm wrong, that you have conversations that aren't about all the mess in your life and that are just fun and that actually, provide you with an opportunity to realign with each other.
Yeah. Keep it light. Accept for and give forgiveness.
Well, that is fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah.
That and it goes along with the whole idea of expectations. If you expect your partner to be a human being,
Not
then
perfect.
You expect them to have issues at times that might rub you up the wrong way. And you need to be able to let that go and forgive them.
Or let them know.
Or let them know. Well, it's always important to let them know, but you need to be able to not belabor it, not harass people over it. Really, just think about it. Would you like to be treated that way?
No.
Do not treat your partner in any way that you would not like to be treated yourself. Just like you don't treat anybody else in any way you don't want to be treated yourself.
So fairly reasonable, but, a little bit structured.
Well, the wording is very formal, I think you could say.
Yeah.
So for someone coming to this without the opportunity to talk about it with someone else, they might find it a bit hard to get their heads around. But as long as it's explained effectively, it would be fine.
But fundamentally, it is what will help a relationship to thrive, I think.
Yes.
I think certainly we've experienced it, even from a less formalised approach, that they're the elements that bring us together.
It's about building alignment.
Yeah. So I'm just conscious of the time. So I think it's a useful thing to think about. I'm hoping that we've given our listeners a little bit of entertainment as well as points of reflection. Keeping in mind we're all human beings, none of us are perfect. It never will run perfectly. But that's what this is about. It's about, let's think about the long haul. I think, and unfortunately there are lots of teenagers out there who don't see long-term relationships.
Well, that's one of the major and fundamental problems with divorce, of course, is that immediately the children lose their trust in long-term relationships and their belief that it's possible.
That's right. Especially
if their parents deal with it in a way that is adversarial and combative and hurtful.
Yeah, you cannot firstly stay in a relationship that's emotionally or physically or both abusive. That's rule number one, because that's what the kids are going to learn as well. But you also need to think about leaving a relationship for the right reasons.
Yes, and being kind to each other when you discover that you've made a mistake and it's not working, okay. But you need to remember that you loved this person once and there were good reasons for that. And even though it didn't last, you and that person and the children you had together deserve for you to do it in a friendly, cooperative and respectful manner.
Yes, absolutely. And on that note, Lorin, thank you very much for joining me. As always, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, darling.
You're welcome. And no doubt we usually continue these things long after we stop having the podcast. So to all you listeners out there, I hope this was entertaining, useful, a point of reflection. Maybe it's a turning point for you about how you are in your relationship. Certainly it's something that needs to be done intentionally and consciously. So until next time, this is me signing off.
And goodbye from me as well.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Gunter Swoboda does individual and group coaching for men looking to grow. For more information on this and the global Making Good Men Great movement, check out goodmengreat.com to get into contact. If you have a topic for the show or would like to be a guest on the air, please email producers at miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda, Miranda, at noirtainment, noirtainment.com. Thank you, and always keep inspiring change.